In the final days of World War II, a weapon so advanced, so dangerous, that Hitler himself gave one chilling order. Burn it, not destroy the enemy, not defend the homeland. Burn the machine. But why would a desperate man, facing total defeat, order the destruction of his most powerful weapon? What was he trying to hide, and from whom? Because what the Allies found in those ashes changed aviation, changed warfare, changed the world, forever, and the answer is far darker than anyone was told. Welcome to World War II Mystery Story, the channel where history's deepest secrets are finally uncovered. Now, before we go any further, if you're new here, think of subscribing like this. You know that one drawer in your home, the one with all the important things you don't want to lose. This channel is that drawer. Hit subscribe so this story never gets lost on you. And one more thing, drop a comment below and tell us, where in the world are you watching from tonight? It was 1944, and Germany was losing. The skies above Europe belonged to the Allies. American bombers flew in enormous formations, hundreds of aircraft striking German cities, factories, and fuel supplies without mercy. Germany's conventional fighter planes could not stop them. They were too slow, too weak, too late. But deep inside a secret German facility, a small team of engineers was building something the world had never seen before: a jet-powered aircraft. No propeller, no piston engine. Pure jet thrust screaming through the air at speeds that made Allied pilots feel like they were standing still. They called it the Heinkel He 162. But the men who flew it had another name for it: the Volksjäger, the People's Fighter. It was sleek, it was fast. It was revolutionary. In test flights, it reached speeds of over 800 kilometers per hour, faster than anything the Allies had in the sky. British pilots who encountered it described a strange feeling, not just fear, but confusion. Because by the time they saw it, it was already gone. Here was the extraordinary paradox that history rarely discusses. Germany, a nation on the brink of total collapse. With bombed-out factories, fuel shortages, and a workforce held together by desperation, had somehow built the most advanced combat aircraft on the planet. But there was a problem that no engineering genius could solve. Time. The war was ending. Resources were gone. Trained pilots were gone. And the man at the top, Adolf Hitler, was no longer thinking like a military strategist. He was thinking like something far more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose. And that is when he gave the order. It is one of history's most puzzling decisions. Not a battle order, not a retreat command, a destruction order. In the closing months of 1944, as Allied forces pushed deeper into German territory from every direction, Hitler summoned his inner circle. The meetings were tense, desperate, fractured. Germany's industrial output was collapsing. Fuel reserves were nearly gone. The Luftwaffe, once the most feared air force on Earth, was being systematically dismantled one squadron at a time. And yet, the He 162 production lines were still running. Thousands of parts, dozens of completed aircraft. Blueprints so advanced that Allied intelligence officers couldn't fully understand them on first inspection. This was leverage. This was negotiating capital. This was the kind of asset that a collapsing nation could use to bargain, to survive, to transition. But Hitler did not see an asset. He saw a threat, not to Germany's enemies, to his legacy. Because here is what the history books quietly skip over. The burn order was never purely military. It was psychological. A leader who could not win decided that no one else would benefit from what he had built. Economists have a term for this behavior: scorched earth capital destruction. It is what happens when ego overrides strategy, when personal pride costs more than national survival. Hitler was not protecting Germany. He was protecting his narrative. If the He 162 fell into Allied hands intact, It would be their victory trophy, their technological leap forward, their story to tell. And so the order went out: burn the planes, leave nothing. But here's where the story takes a turn that no one expected. His own engineers disobeyed him. Quietly, carefully, deliberately. They buried blueprints in salt mines. They hid aircraft in forest clearings covered with branches. They did what brilliant people always do when a broken system tries to destroy what they created. They preserved it, because they understood something Hitler had completely lost sight of. True innovation does not belong to the man who ordered it. It belongs to the idea itself, and ideas cannot be burned. April 1945. The guns were still firing, but a different kind of operation had already begun. Quietly, systematically, with surgical precision. While infantry divisions pushed forward through burning German towns, a separate group of men moved in a completely different direction. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They carried clipboards alongside their rifles. They spoke in technical language. They asked unusual questions. They were looking not for prisoners of war, but for knowledge. The Americans called it Operation Paperclip. And what it really was the largest corporate acquisition in modern history conducted under the cover of war. These Allied intelligence units fanned out across defeated Germany with one specific mission: find the scientists, find the blueprints, find the machines. And when they reached the hidden forest clearings, the salt mines, the partially destroyed factory floors, they found something that stopped them cold. The He-162, not burned, not destroyed. Waiting, intact airframes, hidden engine components, rolled up technical drawings tucked inside waterproof containers, buried meters underground. Germany's engineers had defied the death order, and in doing so, they had essentially prepackaged the future of aviation and left it for whoever arrived first. The British took several aircraft back to test facilities in Farnborough. The Americans shipped others to Wright Field in Ohio. What they discovered during those test flights disturbed them deeply, because the He-162 was not just fast. It was structurally ahead of anything they were developing. The engine placement, the wing design, the thrust-to-weight calculations. These were not the desperate innovations of a losing nation. These were the blueprints of the next generation. But the aircraft were only half the discovery. The more valuable asset was the men who built them. Over 1,600 German scientists and engineers were quietly transferred into American custody. Not as prisoners, as employees, given new identities, new addresses, new salaries, their past carefully filed away. Their knowledge immediately put to work. Within a decade, the rockets, jet engines, and aerospace systems they developed under American contracts became the backbone of the space race. One of those men, Wernher von Braun, would eventually stand in a NASA control room and watch an American rocket leave Earth's atmosphere, built on German mathematics, funded by American capital, presented to the world as pure American achievement. This is the moment every serious entrepreneur must study with cold, clear eyes, because what happened in those German forests in 1945 happens in boardrooms today, when a company collapses, when a startup fails, when a visionary is forced out. The assets do not disappear, they get acquired. Quietly, legally, completely. The name changes, the story changes, but the technology, the talent, the intellectual capital simply transfers ownership. The greatest mistake Germany made was not losing the war. It was believing that destroying what it built would prevent others from benefiting. It did not. It only removed Germany's name from the credits. Here is the question that every entrepreneur, every business builder, every decision maker must sit with quietly. If your empire collapsed tomorrow, what would they find in the ashes? The story of the He-162 is not really a war story. It never was. It is a story about what happens to value, when leadership loses its judgment. Germany did not lose its technological advantage because the Allies were smarter. Germany lost it because the man at the top, in his final, desperate hours, chose destruction over transition, and that single choice handed the future to someone else. This pattern did not die in 1945. It walks into offices every single day. A founder who would rather shut the company down than hand it to a successor. A CEO who destroys internal data, cancels contracts, burns partnerships, the moment he senses he is losing control. A business owner who takes proprietary systems to the grave rather than build structures that outlive him. These are not dramatic, cinematic moments. They are quiet. They happen in boardrooms, in legal offices, in late-night emails sent in anger, and every single time. The result is identical to what happened in Germany. Someone else benefits. Someone else finds the buried blueprints. Someone else tells the story. The engineers who disobeyed Hitler's burn order understood something profound. They separated their work from their leader's ego. They did not burn the planes because a broken man gave a broken order. They preserved the work because the work was bigger than the moment. This is perhaps the most important business principle that formal education never teaches. Your creation is not your possession. It is your responsibility. The He-162 was not Hitler's plane. It belonged to the engineers who designed it at 3 a.m., who tested it in freezing conditions, who refined every calculation with trembling hands inside a nation falling apart around them. He simply signed the paperwork. And yet history almost let him erase it. The second lesson is perhaps even more uncomfortable. The Allies did not win the aerospace race through pure innovation. They won it through strategic acquisition. They identified collapsing systems. They moved fast. They extracted the most valuable assets, the human capital, the intellectual property, the technical knowledge, and they repackaged it under a new flag. This is not cynicism. This is how real competitive advantage transfers in every industry, in every era. The businesses that dominate tomorrow are already quietly studying which systems around them are beginning to collapse. So what is the final lesson the He-162 leaves behind for every serious entrepreneur watching today? 3 things. First, never allow ego to make capital decisions. The moment destruction feels more satisfying than transition, the leader has already lost. Second, build systems and structures that carry value beyond your personal involvement. If everything burns when you leave, you never really built anything. Third, study collapsing systems with discipline and without emotion. Because inside every collapse, there are buried blueprints. There is hidden talent. There is preserved innovation, waiting for someone calm enough to find it. Hitler ordered the plane burned. His engineers saved it. The Allies found it, and the world was changed. Not by the man who gave the order, but by the ones who quietly refused it. The most dangerous person in any organization is not the competitor outside the building. It is the leader inside it, who would rather burn the future than admit they could not control it. This has been World War II Mystery Story. The secrets of history, decoded for the decisions of today.